Well, first of all, I don't trust Tim Walz on anything.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott just shut down Tim Walz in front of the entire country. And wait until you hear his ultimate demand.
Who's challenging sitting Republican Senator Dan S. Sullivan. Dan J. Sullivan claims his campaign is for real, but he's being accused of running simply to confuse voters. President Trump writing, radical left Democrats have put up another man named Dan Sullivan, and they did this to take votes away from our great senator of the same name. Democrats are trying to trick Alaskans. Now, the Alaska Democrats.
Okay, hold on. The radical left knows they're losing, so they are resorting to the cheapest tricks in the book. Trump says Democrats found a guy with the exact same name as the Republican incumbent just to confuse voters on the ballot. It is like a desperate college kid changing the grades on his report card in pen. But if you thought they would get away with stealing a Senate seat like this, think again. The feds are actually stepping in.
It's a battle between two Dan Sullivans in Alaska's Senate race. Two Republicans with the same name are running in the August 18th primary. The Dan Sullivan on your left is a two-term Republican incumbent and ally of President Trump. The Dan Sullivan on your right is a retired teacher who filed his candidacy just 3 days before the deadline. If you thought remembering their different
Notice what they are trying to pull here, but as they just reported, the DOJ is not letting this slide. According to the news, a grand jury is now issuing subpoenas to investigate this as potential fraud and election interference. The Democrats deny they are involved, of course they do, but they are not just trying to rig the ballot box. It gets worse, because now Tim Walz and his attorney general are trying to use the courts to attack federal law enforcement.
Democratic Party and the Mary Patola campaign have denied any involvement in the alleged scheme. Dan J. Sullivan says he's a pragmatic Republican and denies his campaign is a sham. The DOJ is reportedly investigating whether there's fraud or conspiracy involved. Now, in the same race on the Democratic side, former House Representative Mary Patola is now.
There it is. Now here is where it escalates. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison is actually suing Texas to force the extradition of a federal ICE agent. This agent was involved in a shooting, and the Department of Homeland Security claims he fired in self-defense. But Walz and Ellison want him prosecuted anyway. They are treating a federal officer like a common criminal just to score cheap political points. But they forgot who they are dealing with in Texas.
Let alone something like this. Well, listen, while they're making demands, I got a demand of my own, and that is, it's time for Minnesota to step up and repay the United States of America and Americans for all the fraud that they've committed in their state under federal programs.
Did you catch that? Greg Abbott just flipped the script on them entirely. He is essentially telling Tim Walz to clean up his own massive mess before making demands of Texas. They want him to hand over a federal officer, but instead, Abbott is holding Minnesota accountable for the massive federal fraud that happened right under their noses. But listen very closely to what he told them next, because this is how you handle the radical left.
And I will not respond to them at all until they step up and do what's right, and they acknowledge their fault in the fraud that took place, and they fully repay the United States of America for the fraud they committed.
Read those words again. The people elected a leader in Texas, not a temporary tenant to push around. Abbott knows you do not negotiate with people who weaponize the justice system. He is demanding they fully repay the United States for their fraud before he even picks up the phone. Tell me I am wrong in the comments, but this is the exact kind of spine Republicans need right now. If you want to see what happens when another liberal governor gets exposed, click the video on your screen right now.